Good afternoon, everybody, or evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Edinburgh Branch meeting. I'm Simon Heath, I'm the branch chair. I don't have a huge amount of information to pass out on the meeting this time, rather than just to remind people to keep an eye on IOSH Connect as it comes out, because that will give you information on other branch meetings that might be of interest to you, or any of the specialist groups doing their chats and topics. There's some good stuff out there, obviously. And it's also a reminder to keep an eye on the IOSH Catch the Wave campaign that's just recently been rolling out, starting some good webinars and sessions on those. And I'd encourage everybody to have a look at that and get involved. It's all part of the ESG process that's gaining traction in the UK at the moment. Without too much delay now, I'll pass you over to Anthony to introduce today's guest speaker.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're really happy to have Andrew Payne back. I actually invited him over to our WorkLife branch. It's been a few months now, and his presentation, it was a bit of a workshop style. It really created some great food for discussion. And so I thought we'd bring him back through the Edinburgh branch and see what sort of insights he can provide you, and you'll also get a chance to join in on the conversation. So a bit about Andrew. So delivering coaching, group workshops, and keynote talks, Andrew is a TEDx and approved Vistage speaker and an ICF accredited coach, working with small to mid-sized businesses, entrepreneurs, charities, schools, and colleges. Alongside coaching and speaking, Andrew is a campaigner and advocate for all victims of domestic abuse, having personally experienced abuse in a former marriage. He is a trustee for a charity which supports families where children are the perpetrators of domestic abuse, and he works closely with the homelessness prevention charity, delivering the HR and fundraising lead. He is a father of 5, which means he's a maid, a taxi driver, a war zone reporter, health and safety officer, chief negotiator, and unappreciated fashion consultant. So without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Andrew to kick us off with some great discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Really appreciate the introduction. You know, when you really think about the 21st century so far, I think you'd have to agree it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, hasn't it? I mean, when you really think about it, you know, it started off, didn't it? 9/11 in 2001. We all know, for those of us that can remember that, where we were when it happened, this terrible day, and we wondered what would happen next. Well, what happened next? We had Afghanistan, Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, which didn't quite exist. We had promises at home of no return to boom and bust. Then boom, there was bust. The greatest banking crisis in living memory, triggering the greatest economic recession in living memory, triggering years of austerity and pain and suffering. We had Brexit, all the pain and division before, during, and after. We have social media now. We didn't have that before the 21st century, and it has transformed how we communicate. And yes, there's some good stuff that comes with that, but there's been a toll on our habits, on our mental health. Never before has everybody else's good bits been shoved up our noses in quite the same way on a daily basis. We've had an unfolding environmental crisis. You know, back in the day when I was a teenager, the late 80s, early 90s, it was clear there were issues with our environment, but these were just kind of some rumblings that perhaps not all was well, but now it's unavoidable. Code red for humanity. Extinction rebellions. We can sense that it's this runaway train getting faster and bigger and faster and bigger, and the final destination is horrendous for our grandchildren, our children within our own lifetime. We have COVID that's just transformed how we've lived, and we'll all have our own stories of pain and suffering and hardship as a result of everything that happened. And just as the world thought it was going to move on from COVID and start getting back to normal, whatever normal is, then we have these issues in Ukraine and real discussions about a possibility of nuclear action. I mean, this is unthinkable. Been a roller coaster ride, this 21st century. And when you add to that turbulence the pressure on our psychology from various angles. So we all know that we shouldn't measure our own sort of where we're at in life by material things. It's about our internal qualities, but we can't help but measure where we're at by what we've achieved at work, how others perceive us. And there's so much pressure. It's so fast paced at work. There's so much communication. The average person today absorbs 74 gigabytes of information every day, which is the same amount of information that the average person would have taken in a lifetime, only 500 years ago. And yet our brains haven't changed in that period of time. We can't help but think about the houses that we live in, the money that's in our savings account or that isn't in our savings account, the cars that we drive, and tie that into, well, have I got to where I want to be? Have I delivered on my potential? But wages are stagnating, living costs are rising. There's so much pressure, there's so much turbulence. And so we shouldn't be surprised that burnout has become this like buzz phrase. It's like everywhere, the word burnout. And some people use it quite loosely. I'm feeling a bit tired. I'm feeling a bit burnt out today. What they really mean is they're not just completely feeling themselves, but they're basically fine. Whereas other people are really not fine and burnt out and taking time off. And you talk to senior managers, when people who have been properly burnt out try and come back from that, the feedback I get is they're never quite the same. They don't have the same levels of resilience that they had before. But given that burnout as an issue isn't going anywhere, given that the problems that we face today will still have more problems as we go into the next 20 years, it's so important that we do talk about burnout. The World Health Organization estimates that burnout costs the global economy an eye-watering $1 trillion every year. They worked out, the World Health Organization, that back in 2016, 745,000 people died in the world from a heart attack or stroke that could be directly linked to having worked excessive hours for prolonged periods of time. There is an impact from burnout. Reports from the American Psychological Association that those people who are burning out are 2.6 times more likely to be looking for another job. And they're 63% more likely to pull sickie, and not just one, but two, three, but four. There's an impact. We need to talk about burnout. We need to understand what it is. We need to understand what some of its triggers are. And then we need to start thinking about how we tackle burnout. Now, we can't possibly cover all of that in huge depth in 1 hour. We cannot solve the burnout problem today. Burnout is an ongoing conversation, but we can start that conversation. And there are some things that we can bounce around today that are helpful, that we can take away with us. So the first point is we've got to define it. We've got to understand what burnout is. And you see, you're making it tricky for me today, I have to say, because usually in picking on someone, I would look around all the faces. I can't see any faces, I just see names. And I generally pick on the person that's got the grooviest background to start us off. But I'm not seeing many backgrounds at all. So I'm going to have to go for one of the committee members. So Simon, your background, I'm not seeing sort of flowers in the back, but you seem like a nice guy. We were chatting before the session. Yeah. So perhaps you could kick us off. What would you define burnout? If you could put that into a phrase, what does that mean to you as a word?
Mental collapse is the way I'd probably see it.
Mental collapse. Okay.
Yeah.
Leading to what, do you think?
Not wanting to do anything, total lethargy, not wanting to get out of your bed, not wanting to go to work, not even wanting to get up and clean anything, but just sit there, veg. It'd even be a struggle to make a cup of coffee for yourself, I think. You know, you just literally, you've just had enough of everything. You just want to sleep your life away.
Yeah, that is an excellent definition. I appreciate that, Simon. Yeah. Simon, would you be so good as to choose me somebody else to add to your definition with other? You can choose anyone you want to.
Let me just change my view. That's what I've got to look at now. See who's in gallery. Right. Okay. How about Fiona Walls?
Fiona, are you there, or have you gone somewhere to feed your cat?
No, I don't have a cat now, so yeah. For me, it's round about personal resilience. When you get to that point where even going home at night, you're just not feeling really up to coming back into work, and you actually dread coming into work.
Yeah.
Given where we are at the moment with OSH professionals, it's been very much an onslaught, and I don't feel that we probably get the recognition that we have an important role to play, but we have burnout as well, because we are running at 120%, and we're still asked to still do a bit more. So for me, I find my personal resilience has dropped dramatically as the pandemic has progressed.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that, Fiona. I really, really do appreciate that. And maybe you can choose one more person. It doesn't matter if what you've got to say is similar to what Simon or Fiona has said, or whether you might add to that. But any other thoughts? If you could just choose me someone else, Fiona. In fact, Fiona, do you know what? I'm going to choose Janetta, because you've come on. You've got a lovely background. Can you add to it's okay to be serious, anxious, happy, sad, relaxed? Love that. Yeah, that's good. Can you share any thoughts you've got yourself on burnout? And like I said, it doesn't matter if you repeat what Simon and Fiona have said or whether you add to that. I just need you to unmute.
Let me unmute myself.
There you go. We've got you. We've got you.
The first word that I would be throwing out there is exhaustion.
Yeah.
Linked with anxiety that's brought on because of potential guilt due to the inability to deliver quality work to a normal standard, or the fear of not being able to deliver to that standard.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting. So as well as that exhaustion, it's being brought on by emotions of sort of guilt and fear, and it's making it worse and worse. And I have to say, between the three of you, because I'm going to describe in a moment the three key symptoms that the World Health Organization defines that go with burnout. And the three of you, between the three of you, you pretty much described the three symptoms. So the official World Health Organization definition of burnout is quite short. It's just chronic workplace stress that has not been well managed. Chronic workplace stress that has not been well managed. And they list three key symptoms for us to consider. The first of which is total exhaustion, emotional, physical, mental. And this is not just something that a lie-in or a weekend in Blackpool will sort out. This is absolute collapse. Simon used the word collapse. You cannot go on. You have finished. There is just nothing left. And inevitably, the second key symptom that then goes with that is this negativity and cynicism about your world, about your work. It feels so unfair, so bleak, so insurmountable that you can't help but get stuck into this negative spiral that then includes guilt, fear, paranoia. And then, of course, what then links to that is a total lack of energy or motivation. Poor time efficiency. The stuff that you could have done in 10 minutes now takes you an hour. You're just like a walking zombie. Now, interestingly though, this chronic workplace stress, those in HR would say, well, it does sound a bit like depression, this burnout stuff. And I was reading in HR News only a year or two ago, and for anybody that wants a riveting bedtime read, HR News, like once you pick it up, you can't put it down. But they were saying how we shouldn't get confused that burnout is a workplace thing. But I have an issue with this because in a recent survey of 7,500 working adults from Gallup, they list the obvious workplace triggers as key triggers of burnout. And they include the stuff you'd imagine: unmanageable workloads leading to long hours, lack of recognition, lack of fairness, poor communication. So jobs get delegated, but then the people delegating don't really do a great job of that handover. So now the person only has half the information, they mess the job up. So that's a communication issue. So of course, these are work-based triggers. But Mental Health UK, in the survey that they did of 3,000 working adults, the triggers that were being revealed from that survey were things like parenting, financial concerns, physical health concerns, isolation, working from home, those aren't necessarily work-based triggers. And from my own experience of burnout, and I want to share them very briefly, I have two very quick stories to tell you. I was truly burnt out at one time in my life, and then a second time in my life more recently, I was on the road to being burnt out, but took some preventative measures, some of which I'll share later on. And the first time I was the long-term victim of domestic violence. It was a dark and horrible time in my life where I lived in fear. I was having panic attacks the whole time. I was utterly exhausted and drained. The impact was definitely felt at work. You know, I was last in, first out. I wasn't focused. I was often anxious. I struggled to engage with very much. And when I came out of that relationship, I absolutely crashed. And I'm so thankful that I had parents that could have me rent-free in their house, because I don't know what would have happened to me otherwise. I was absolutely burnt out. The impact felt at work, but not caused by work. The second time when I was on the road to being burnt out was in the first COVID lockdown. You see, I'm blissfully remarried now to a wonderful woman. We have 3 boys under 9, but she is an NHS key worker. And so when COVID kicked off, she's under huge pressure, working long hours. I now have 3 boys in my house the whole time. The house is an absolute state. I've got to homeschool these boys. And I don't know if anyone here is a parent on a parent's class WhatsApp chat. Because if you are, you'll know these places are cesspits of one-upmanship, where by 10 o'clock in the morning, there's always a parent that's smashed homeschooling. They're already baking cupcakes for the NHS key workers. And my boys, they're on their 9th episode of Kung Fu Panda, refusing to do any work. And so this guilt started to play on me. And I was, my own business and charity work that I do, I was doing it late at night till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. Then Henry, my youngest, has got me up at 6. And I was becoming increasingly irrational. I was doing a terrible job of any kind of homeschooling. Our house was not a happy place. I was angry. And in the end, my wife and I had this conversation where it's like, actually, we need to take some measures here. This isn't working out. And so we took some measures together of how to manage that and take me off the road to burnout. But the point is that the triggers for this second experience of burnout, well, they were a mix, weren't they? Some of it was work. I was pushing myself too hard. Some of it was the extraordinary circumstances that we found ourselves in. Some of it was most definitely parenting, which complicated things for me hugely. So again, it's a mix. And so if we're serious about investigating burnout and about tackling it, we have to understand that there are triggers at work that we need to think about. There are triggers at home that we need to think about. So we have sort of 2 things that we need to think about. How do we look after each other corporately better together in the groups that we work in at work? And how do we equip ourselves to make better decisions for ourselves as well at home? Both things need to be covered if we're going to talk about burnout. So let's think about work first. Now, the common triggers, Harvard Business Review, they came up with their 6 key triggers. And the common triggers are as you would expect: lack of fairness, lack of appreciation, lack of clarity of role, poor communication. And the granddaddy of all is an unmanageable workload leading to long hours. Now, I want to fire out a question here. See, I'm going to share with you shortly some things that I see other organizations doing to manage burnout. I'm not saying these things would work for you in your organizations. I'm just throwing out some ideas because burnout is a conversation. It requires experimenting with all kinds of things. But before I share those things that I see, I wonder what you've seen. Is there anybody here who could share something cool, really cool, that their employer's doing to manage well-being and mental health? And if nobody pipes up, that's a bit of a worry, actually. But if 1 or 2 of you have ideas, well, that's great. Let's share those out there. Let's get the conversation going. So I'm not going to pick on anyone. And if there's a resounding silence, I'm going to assume that you're all working for employers that are doing nothing, which says something. So does anybody want to unmute and share an idea? I'll give you about 30 seconds, then I'm just going to jump in there myself. I've got any hands going up? Anyone want to unmute? Oh, yeah. Janetta, sorry, is it Janetta?
Janetta, yeah, I don't mind. The reason that I've got this, it's okay. Zoom background up is it's part and parcel of a mental health campaign that we started approximately a year ago within Cummins, a US-based organisation, and the UK's well ahead of the US when we talk about worker stress management, etc. But we now have this pretty robust programme. There is information formulated, produced, sent out on a monthly basis on various different topics. And initially, the first focus really was to destigmatise mental health. You know, so that was a big push at the start, and then all the information is now flowing after that. What I'm also doing in conjunction with our health and wellness folks, for our North American health and safety colleagues, who are, just as has already been mentioned here, have got all the additional COVID responsibilities on top of their normal daily activities of keeping their colleagues safe at work. And we were hearing loud and clear, especially from that North American group, about how stressed they were, how they were feeling. And a lot of what you've already mentioned, we got feedback in a voice of the customer exercise we did with them. So we're actually now kind of finalising a set of modules. It's going to be pretty quick, a half-hour modular session that's interactive, that will go to all the managers of HSE individuals, and they'll have one set of information and then a set of information for the HSE individuals themselves. And what that is doing, the content of that is signposting them,
yeah,
different areas of support, both internally and externally. It's also signposting them to recognition of signs of stress and burnout, giving them tools to address some of those drivers that can be controlled within their work environment and externally, and also especially for managers to flag how their behaviour can cause stress in their employees.
And I mean, all of it, really useful stuff. Even a really simple thing, if you're on Teams and Zoom meetings a lot, your background, it provokes a question of, I'm thinking, what's behind your head? Even little things like that, say, we've just got this thing in our, it just keeps that conversation. You know, these are some of the small and quick and easy wins that cost nothing, but start to make a difference. Does anybody else have any other thoughts they want to share before I'm going to open up my slide deck and just share a few things that I see other organizations doing? Does anybody else want to jump in for a couple of moments?
Yeah, I'll throw one into the mix. It's not my current employer, it's my last employer, Edinburgh based, and they were a wind turbine manufacturing company, and it was the installation part of the business, and they used to run social gatherings over Teams or Zoom, whichever format we had at the time, and they seem to go down so well, and they actually do things like dressing up days, get the kids dressed up, have quizzes, virtual pub nights where they'd all have a drink and a chat on open chat, and you know, they'd win things like a bar of chocolate or a Kit Kat for the best dressed person, or you know, something along that line. Just something very short, very simple, but they did them on a very regular basis. They didn't pull them out like once a month. It was like a weekly thing, and it was like every Thursday night, or because you didn't want to encroach on a Friday, because they got, you know, people are going to try and do that sort of thing for real. You know, so Thursday night they'd actually set out and they wouldn't last that long, but they were short and sweet, and just to get people going. And I thought that was a really good idea. And listening to some of the planning discussions, you know, they were asking for ideas all the time, because they didn't want to have the same thing and make it monotony. They wanted you to mix it up and do something different and something exciting. One of the popular ones was pick an area of Edinburgh and go and do a virtual pub crawl. how the heck they did it. I never got to do any of those. Unfortunately, my part of the company was working too hard. but it sounded so much fun to do.
Yeah. And fun things done regularly, so it's not just a really rare thing. It's just part of every day of the culture of the company. I'm going to attempt to share my screen now. If this goes badly wrong, we'll just ditch the slides and I'll go without. And I'm going to I'll start there. Current slide, and let's just see how. Oh, it's not going to go to my current slide. Okay, well, don't go to my current slide then. Oh, maybe you are. Yeah, let's just work through this because I've already discussed this. So this is just going to bring us up to where I am. So some of the things I see other organizations doing, I just want to talk through this real quick. So some organizations are really taking the mental health first aid stuff really seriously. There's a 2-day mental health first aid course that you can go on. But what they're doing, which I really like, is they're not saying, we'll send some of our staff on that course, then that's job done, box ticked, excellent, all done. What they're saying is, no, when our people then come back off that course, how do we put mental health at the forefront of who we are and what we do in our internal communications, for example, in our team meetings? How are we going to really make this like an everyday important part of the conversation? And it could be small things like Janetta with her background. Actually, do you know what? In our team, we're going to have that as our background because it's a really thought-provoking thing to do. What else, at the footers of our emails or whatever it could be. The point of getting your staff the mental health first aid training is saying, well, when we come back from that, what now? What do we do? What do we put in place? I know point number 2, a social enterprise. I know that they do amazing charity work, but they raise 70% of their income through social enterprise. So their shops are really important. They now shut all their shops at 4 o'clock rather than 5 o'clock. Simply in reference to mental health and work-life balance. And the interesting thing is, I know that we can't all do this, by the way, I'm just saying, but the interesting thing is they're not making any less when it comes to sales. Their sales have not gone down, even though they're working slightly less hours. And this ties in with some of the experiments in Iceland, where 2,500 Icelandic public sector workers reduced down from 36-hour working weeks, which we in the UK would consider, well, that's not that much anyway, but they reduced it down to 32-hour working weeks, and there was no loss overall on output when they measured it, although people were reporting an even better work-life balance. So we can, in some roles and in some companies, gently reduce down our hours if we're more efficient, but as long as we have systems in place and we have the right mentality, when we have better work-life balance, the evidence would suggest that we get more done in those slightly reduced hours. Point number 3 is absolutely vital. If you want to create a psychologically safe space where people can open up about really tough and personal things in their life, they're more likely to do that if they've already seen their leaders doing that and that it is okay and it is safe to be open. So again, where we have leadership being encouraged to not just be strong and composed in the face of adversity, but to be real, to open up, to share where they're struggling. It's really important. It's all around vulnerability. And I was reading some stuff by Harvard business professor Amy Edmondson recently in Forbes, and she was talking about excuse me, how when leaders open up, it just creates this knock-on following effect where other people can't help but open up as well. But where you have leaders who set high standards because we feel like we should, the issue is that then everyone else feels like they should follow these high standards. And so that balance between, of course, we need some composure in the face of adversity, but we need to be able to be vulnerable and open in our leadership roles. Grumble time, not crumble time. I mean, crumble time, actually, that would be great. Crumble time. I love a crumble, but it's definitely grumble time. And this was, I saw some, it was Amazon marketing executives. I did some stuff for them and they shared this idea that for them worked really well. And I think this is a terrible idea for some teams, and for some teams, it's a brilliant idea. But for this particular team, it was great. So grumble time was, they had a weekly team meeting. And at the beginning of each meeting, for 10, 15 minutes, they just had a total whinge and moan about everything that was awful in their world. And no one was forced to share. But what they found was then at sort of 10, 15 minutes, they stopped, they sort of had a break of state, made a coffee, and then it's like, right, let's get on with the meeting. And you might think, but starting on a negative footing, that's no way to start a meeting. But what they found out was that in between the meetings, the weekly meetings, some of the stuff that they shared, some of the people were struggling, they were reaching out to one another saying, hey, listen, you shared yesterday, man, that sounds terrible, you know. And they found it really helpful. They found it really therapeutic, and they have kept Grumble Time. Grumble Time was in response to the COVID lockdown, and it was virtual meetings. Now they've gone back to working more in the office. They still do Grumble Time as a way of safeguarding their mental well-being. And the point with Grumble Time is it is up to smaller teams to find for themselves the things that are going to work, to experiment with different ideas, but which keep mental well-being at the absolute center of who we are and what we do. The last one I want to very briefly share is I was doing some work with some NHS tutors and they have an agreement that there's a protocol that they shouldn't work after 6 o'clock or do anything on emails, but they recognize that there are some who would like to be sending emails at 10 o'clock. So the agreement is, if you're one of these people, you're going to choose to be on your emails at 10 o'clock. You ain't sending them. You can put them all into your email drafts and click send tomorrow morning at whatever time it is. But after 6 o'clock, nobody in our team sends an email, period. That's what happens. You can draft it out, but you ain't sending it. And there's just an agreement in that team. No one's going to get fired if they break the agreement. It's just that team have got that particular agreement for themselves because that's what works for them. But these are some of the small things where, if as teams we're saying, you know, with the pressure that we're facing and all the rubbish stuff that's going on, what are the small things that we could do that genuinely help each other and that keep mental health at the center of who we are and what we do? These are some of the steps you can take. I'm not saying you should do all these. I'm saying use these as your inspiration. Come away from this call, go and talk to your teams. If you haven't already done so, you might already be doing so, but go and have those conversations. Come up with your own ideas that might work for you. But if that's stuff that we can do to look at each other corporately, what are some of the things we can do to look after ourselves? And I want to share a few things that helped me in this second point of burnout, that second story I shared with you in COVID, where I was really struggling, but I had that chat with my wife. It wasn't a bad chat, by the way, with my wife. We were just talking rationally about how do we deal with this situation, and some stuff we trialed that worked really well. I'm not saying this will absolutely work for you, but I'm saying if you're under pressure, consider some of these things. A happy anchor. Now, let me just explain what a happy anchor is. So when I was caught in that violent and abusive marriage, I was living in the south of France, and every Monday night I played football with some guys. Come rain or shine, January, -3, we'd be out there, hats and scarves, still playing football. And after the game of football, we'd go for a few beers and then I'd go home. And looking back, I realize now that that football outing was a lifeline for me in those dark times. That actually on Tuesday, I was already looking forward to the next Monday. And in my darkest times, I had this wonderful thing that would happen every week that just kind of kept me going. So in COVID lockdown, myself and my wife were like, well, maybe we need to create a happy anchor for ourselves that gives us some rhythm and structure, that's really regular, that gives us real joy in who we are and what we do, that won't alleviate the problems, but just gives us that kind of almost like a lighthouse, that beacon every week that we can look forward towards. And so we decided to have Red Wine Friday. I'm not advocating that alcohol is will solve burnout, by the way, just putting that out there. But Red Wine Friday was, we decided to stop drinking alcohol in the week. We wouldn't have a drink from Sunday right through to Friday. We thought that would be a good thing. It would mean that Friday would be really, really special. And then we thought, well, because we're drinking less wine now, we'll buy it from the Wine Society. We'll get really good stuff. So not only are we going to have that break on a Friday night, it'll be a really good bottle of wine. And because we're just, one of the things we're going to do is cook really simple meals in the week because we've got so much on. On a Friday, we'll cook pizzas from scratch with the kids. We'll get some salsa music going on Alexa, and it would just be this joyful occasion. And it was every Friday. So on Monday and Tuesday, when I'm battling with the homeschooling, my house is a tip. I'm treading on Lego when I wasn't expecting it. And I'm feeling like I'm boiling over with anger. I can remind myself that in a few days' time, it's Red Wine Friday. and it's going to be cool. It's going to be okay. And having a happy anchor really helped me. And if you are under huge pressure, what I would throw out to you is, what is your happy anchor? Do you have something in your diary every week that truly gives you high levels of joy? And the happiness chemicals, serotonin, melatonin, these are provoked by things like exercise. Dopamine is one of the others. Exercise, a sense of reward, music, particularly in setting the scene, connecting with others. Do you have something that kind of encapsulates all of that? And if you have something that you think you do, what other elements can you add in to beef up the level of joy that you feel? And if you have something that you do fortnightly, I'd say that's not enough. You need something that when it's happened, it ain't that long till the next time it happens. And when you have a happy anchor, it's amazing how much, when you're under pressure and you can feel like you're sinking, at least you know you've got this thing every week. Allied to a happy anchor, this created another real habit that I've always struggled with. You see, mindfulness, you may have heard of this, but it's about being present in the moment and being able to really focus on the here and the now. And I'm not very good at that, because I like to just jump around in my concentration. And once I start, I'm closing my mind. Oh, what was the score last night between Arsenal and United? Or what am I going to have for tea? I can never focus for more than about 3 seconds. But actually, the red wine thing on Red Wine Friday, it started to create a mindfulness habit, because I was spending more on the wine. So when I opened the bottle, I was smelling it. I wasn't just knocking it back. I was sipping it really, and really looking at the color of it. And I mean, my family thought I'd go bonkers. My wife was like, Andrew, you never smell wine. Are you okay? But there were other habits that I started to building on this. I'd have a cup of tea in the morning when we were going through the homeschooling, and I'd just step outside into the garden. The kids would all be safe and everything. I'd just step outside in the garden for 10, 20 seconds, drink the tea, feel the heat of it, feel grateful for the tea in the garden. And it was amazing how just a 20-second snippet of being mindful, being in the moment, of just kind of appreciating what I've got there and then, was really helpful. Now, this didn't take a lot of time. Mindfulness won't cost you a fortune unless you want to book onto a mindfulness course that costs you a fortune. But mindfulness, you can start choosing to sort of enjoy the here and the now. So when you do your walk to the newsagent or to work or a school run, rather than being one of these parents that's just text walking with your phone and then you're just scrolling at the school gate, you have data, mobile and Wi-Fi off on your phone as a standard operating procedure. You only turn it on very mindfully when you need it, but you stand at the gates and you look at the air, not the air, but you feel the air and the breeze. You look around at and you start taking stuff in. And I found when I was struggling in lockdown and I felt like I was about to burn out, that developing mindfulness really helped me. And as someone that is quite jumpy around, as you can probably sense from me, I've become quite mindful actually, and I've got a lot better at it, at this sense of what, if I've got something, if I'm going to have a cup of tea, I'm going to really savor the taste and think about what's gone into it and think about that cup, and not be thinking, rather whilst drinking my tea, oh, I wonder what's happening on the news. I wonder what Boris is saying today. None of that. Let's try and focus on the moment. And perhaps you could take just a couple of minutes a day as a habit, just to reflect on something. It could be the coffee, it could be something that's food or drink or something in nature. But that helped me when I was in my low, because I always knew that I'd have a mindful moment each day. So when it was going crazy with the kids, I always knew I had that mindful moment, and that helped me. Now, as you can probably imagine, I do sometimes get a little bit angry about stuff. And when I was going through the lockdown thing, and I felt very angry, my business was struggling. Well, it wasn't really happening. There was just so little happening, and I'd worked so hard to build it up and got the kids. And this process really helped me, whereby I would immediately connect with a happy memory, a beautiful memory. And there's one that I have. We were in an area near Carcassonne in France several years ago, well before COVID, and we discovered this beautiful village in the mountains called La Grasse. We just went to have a look at it because we heard it's quite nice, but they dam the river in the summer and you can swim in it, and that's beautiful. And we didn't know this, but we just thought, well, we'll go and swimming in our clothes anyway. And it was an amazing time with the kids. And it was, you know, and I can connect with that memory. I could do that now, feel how cold the water was. Remember kind of swimming in that water. I can hear my kids squealing with delight now. And that sense of this is just amazing. And so when I'm feeling highly stressed and angry or under pressure, I can connect with that memory immediately, which creates a little bit of calm. I can take a breath. So now I'm really pausing. And then I can ask this very powerful question. How would a smart person handle this? And the beauty of this question is that you can't then say, how would a smart person handle this? What am I having for tea tonight? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. The very question, when you ask it, you are compelled to come up with some kind of an answer, but from a smart person's point of view, you come out of the situation briefly. And then the smart person, well, they might do this or they might do that. And immediately you're thinking a bit more rationally. So I do that when I'm stuck in traffic. I hate traffic, I really do. But when I'm about to punch my steering wheel and I'm about to swear and shout in the car as if that's going to help, I breathe after the happy memory. How would a smart person handle this? Well, they'd probably switch over from Radio 1 onto Classic FM. They'd probably remind themselves that actually right now, I am traffic. I'm cursing the traffic, but I am traffic. A smart person would keep their phone away, and a smart person might think about or rehearse some stuff in my mind that I know of, so I can at least use the time. And suddenly I'm not punching my steering wheel anymore. Now, this doesn't take away an unmanageable workload. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is when we're feeling overwhelmed by stuff, it is a useful process if you are also becoming mindful in your habits. And if also you have a happy anchor. This is the kind of stuff that just gives us some tools to handle what we're currently having to handle. I want to share a couple more things, and then I'm actually going to stop for some questions and answers and a bit more conversation, because I've been talking a long time, and you didn't just book onto this to hear me chunter away for the whole hour. I do also think that one thing people have struggled with in lockdown is just this sense of planning our time, because actually it's amazing how many people don't have great time planning protocols that might enable them to get more done so that they can truly log off at 6 or whatever time you set for yourself and log off guilt free. So I just want to share a few things that I do. And I'm not saying in my time planning system that you should do what I do. I'm just saying this is what I do. Because I have a system, I'm very effective. But interestingly, on the days when I don't stick to the system, I faff about. I'll go on to the BBC News, and within 20 minutes, I'm still on the internet. I haven't been conscious at the time. I'm now looking at the world's best outdoor swimming pools. It'd be a list of 10. And I've made my way down to 2, and I can't wait to see what number 1 looks like. But when I use this system, that stuff doesn't happen. I get more done. So let's just have a look at this. So I have a hardback A4 diary that I use. I block out my time. I don't draw any clever grids. I just, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I start thinking about what I'm going to put in those time slots. And this is really important because there is a planning fallacy. I'm sure you're all aware that we as people routinely underestimate how long tasks take. But when you start being a bit more mindful about your time, you're actually spending a bit of time blocking it out. The more you start analyzing and thinking, reflecting, the better you get in your analysis of how long things will take. On a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I always start my day with about 10 minutes of planning and scheduling and blocking it out and really thinking things through. So it's not very long, but on a Monday, I spend about 25 minutes on a Monday morning. And if that means I have to start earlier, then I will. If it means because I'm doing a school run that I need to do it on the Sunday evening, then I will. I make sure I get that time in, and I plan the Monday. And I also give sort of 10 or 15 minutes thought to the week. And I might already be populating ahead and just being clear about it very calmly. Usually I've got a coffee in hand, so it doesn't feel like it's a hassle. And I prefer a hardback diary because it takes me away from a screen. Anything that takes me away from the screen is a good thing. This is a creative task. It's not an administrative task. The other thing I do is my protocol, as I possibly alluded to earlier, is that my data, mobile and Wi-Fi is off on my phone. But I do turn it on in my scheduled blocks of time, and my phone goes crazy with all the messages coming through. But if it wasn't off, I'd just be checking and scrolling the whole time. And that's no longer a problem for me because it's always on. You bump into me in Aldi on a Saturday morning with the kids, it would be a very bad idea for me to go to Aldi with the kids on a Saturday morning. But if you bumped into me in Aldi on a Saturday morning with kids and you said, please, can I check your phone? You said that your stuff, I'd show you my phone and you would see that my data, mobile and Wi-Fi is off. It's just off, except for in the scheduled blocks of time in my planner. The other thing I do, this has really worked wonders for me. I don't use it that much now because I'm pretty much on it. But if I have a task on Tuesday, I don't get it done. Then Wednesday, and I'm looking back and looking forwards on the diary, I move it across to Wednesday maybe, but it gets a sad face now because I've delayed on it. I didn't do it on the day I said I was going to do it. And if it happens a second time, I have to move it again. It gets a second sad face. And on a third sad face, see, it doesn't take very long to draw that sad face. On a third sad face, I'll just have a bit of a chat with myself. Like, well, has it just been one of those weeks? Probably has, or maybe this task isn't that important, or maybe it is, or maybe this is just the wrong week to be trying to attend to this task. So I'll deal with it. But the sad face just flags up some of the stuff that I'm routinely missing, or the stuff that I'm not getting done. And less so now, but previously in my former life, I was a master procrastinator, and this helped me in my habits to just get a bit more on top of it. Where we can plan our time according to where our natural energies are, that is helpful. When it comes to exercise, I am hugely about exercise in the evenings. I play football in the evenings, I run in the evenings, but morning jogs, no, not a chance. If you bang on my door wanting a run at 6:30, I'll be throwing something at you. Mornings, I'm not an exercise guy, but mornings, even if I've had a bad night's sleep, that's when mentally I'm at my best. So complicated, important mental tasks, I try and put in the morning. I know in the afternoon I'm going to be flagging, but what energizes me is meeting people. So generally I try and do stuff that has me on my feet, or meeting people in a cafe face to face, because that just revives my flagging spirits in the afternoon. This is hugely important. And then I'm going to close up for questions and answers. As people, we generally will attend to the tasks that feel very urgent and things that we can just cross off our list very quickly, because we just love to cross things off a list. And so that means that the things that we can't just cross off our list often get put on the back burner, but the really important things we generally can't just cross off our list because it's going to take us a while to do them. The game-changing tasks, they're normally things that will take months to achieve, where you're chipping away at it. So I always make sure when I'm doing that bit of planning at the start of each day, that even if I'm just stacked out with meetings and urgent and immediate stuff, I always make sure that there is something going on that day, that some time is scheduled for something that is truly important, even if it's not very much time, so that my game-changing tasks that I'm aware of and I'm conscious of are being progressed as we go along. These kind of things won't transform your life. They don't take your workload away from you. But for those of you on this call that may be working from home, when you have protocols, when you have your own system with different rules that you're happy to stick to because you created them, you will get more done. And if you can get more done in the hours that you're working, it is possible that you could log off guilt-free at whatever time you choose. Now, I'm conscious that, if we're going to tackle burnout, we need longer than an hour. Today is just a start of a conversation. And I'm aware also that I've been talking now for quite a long time and there's 10 minutes left. So what I want to do is shut down my slide, which I'm going to do. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And I'm going to just throw this out to people. Any questions that you've got on burnout, do ask them. If I can't answer, I'm not going to wing it. I'll just say, look, I don't know the answer to that. And maybe someone else on the call can. If I can answer it, then I will. So I'm going to stop. And by the way, if there's no questions, then that's fine. I don't feel awkward about that if nobody else doesn't. And it's okay if there's no questions. But does anybody want to fire in some questions or talk about or ask the group a question about burnout following what I've just shared?
I would like to ask something. Julie.
Hi, Julie. Thanks.
Hi. I've really enjoyed your content today. There's a lot of things that I've written down that I thought I'm going to try that. So thank you for But what my question is about is where I work, whenever people go on holiday, they feel really unable to switch off their mobile phone in case somebody needs them while they're on holiday. And the leading managers make sure that they're visible when they're on holiday, so nobody else feels that they can just switch off and enjoy their week off or their fortnight off. And I find that really difficult to handle, because I want to switch off from a holiday, but I feel obliged to remain in contact, and I find it hard to handle that.
Yeah, and I really feel for you, Julie, and that's in a way kind of what I was referencing about leaders being vulnerable. If leaders are open and vulnerable, then it makes it safe for everyone else to be. And I'm really sad to hear that your leaders should be setting a better example. They should be, when they go away on their email, having the autoresponder where there's a real fun personal message that says, listen, I'm in Scarborough, wherever I go, in my wetsuit, in my flip-flops, there should be some kind of vibrant message that makes you smile when you get that auto response back. And there should be a sense of, actually, unless it's absolutely urgent, real critical, and a defining of what that is, we should go away on holiday and switch off. I would just say, Julie, I find it quite hard, because what if when I go away for 2 weeks, we usually go away on summer holidays for 2 weeks, what if I get some inquiries, some speaker agents who represent me, and they need a quick answer? Well, they get my autoresponder that I'm on holiday, and I have to accept that in doing that, I will lose some pieces of business, but that it is good for my mental health to energize. But I do find it hard, and I need my wife to help me, and she does in a really helpful way. Reminds me that actually, I need to not go onto my emails on the third day of our holiday. And if I am going to check, there's one check halfway through, and that is it. Those kind of boundaries you can. But I'm disappointed. I think I would. It's obviously out of your control in terms of your leadership, but definitely as a team, some conversation around boundaries on what you're going to stick to as a team would be really helpful. But no, I'm sorry to hear that, Julie.
Well, thank you for that. I like the idea of the email responses having something connected to their holiday that makes you,
something that makes I've had some brilliant ones sent back to me that makes me think I need to steal that. That's brilliant. Really made me smile.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Anybody else with any other questions? There's 5 minutes left. Anyone want to ask anything else?
I have a question. Because we've got so many OSH professionals, so occupational health and safety professionals on the call today, some of them might be involved in coming up with strategies to support other employees. So if you were to look at it from an employer perspective, what sort of tips might you give as far as setting up line manager strategies with the employees that you're managing to help manage their burnout? So not so much your own, but also other people's.
I feel like there's no one answer that one can give to that. I'd feel like that there are steps. I'd say there are like a few critical steps that should underpin any sort of move forward with well-being. One is I keep going on about this, but the leaders and managers, they need to start the ball rolling by being vulnerable and opening up these conversations and making it clear that it's okay to be open. We are okay. We're not just saying it's okay. We're actually taking action and opening ourselves up here and revealing our own struggles. Once that happens and there's some trust that it's okay to be open, then the conversation can be, so how are we really doing? What are we struggling with? What needs to change? How do we look after it? Because each team's going to be different. No one solution is going to work for one group and another. So the conversation, what do you need? How can we support you? How can we serve you? But people will only generally open up to those questions, really open up, if they're trusting that it's already a safe space. So the leaders have to set that safe space first. Once people are opening up, then we have to start responding. And it may be that some things that they want can't be done. And it may be some things that they want can be done. And it could be at that point you start thinking, well, do we need to be more flexible with our hours? Does mental health first aid training, that is an obvious one, but the danger with mental health first aid training is it turns into a tick box exercise. and how do we actually really make that a living, an impactful thing on our organization. So for me, there's just a simple: leaders open up safe psychological spaces over a period of a few months and really set the ball rolling. The conversation: how are we? What do people need? Where are the struggles? And then the third step is that you respond to that, and you're going to get a variety of things. You get a variety of challenges, a variety of initiatives, but we must have that conversation, because the impact of burnout, and I haven't focused on it too much today, but is serious. It is early mortality, major depression. The research shows that. And it's not that when people are working crazy hours, they drop dead there and then, but it's clear from the research that there is an impact. There is an impact, and one of those is early mortality. But the immediate impact for employers is people looking for other jobs, people off sick, which then creates so much pressure for everyone else back in the workplace. Because what do? Do we replace them? Oh no, well, someone's got to take up their work. So as employers, we've got to get into this conversation and then take action on it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it just reminded me, so for everyone on the call, I do work with the volunteers. I'm not a salesperson, but it does make me think with IOSH's new campaign of Catch the Wave, it's all about social sustainability. So I think a lot about what we're talking about with burnout will tie into that. So I know as an employee of IOSH, I'm quite keen to see what kind of material are going to come out of some of those training courses, because to stay true to our managing safely and leading safely, I know we've got managing sustainably, leading sustainably, and working sustainably. These courses are all in the works. So I know I'm going to really be looking forward to what kind of content's in there, because I think when we can't talk about social sustainability without talking about things like burnout, because really the whole point of it is putting people back into the equation as far as how we look at business. So like not even thinking about just the bottom line, but thinking about how if we've got a happy workforce, then we're going to have a healthy workforce. And then, yeah, sure, it's going to affect the bottom line too. But it's really looking at that part of the equation and giving it more emphasis than we've maybe done in the past in the very commercialized world that we live in.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. No, that's helpful, Anthony. Any other questions? It's nearly 3. I'm conscious we all need to get off to meetings and things. I would just say, if you've got any questions that you suddenly think of that you want answering, because my surname is Payne, P-A-I-N, my initial is A, unfortunate initial for my surname, but it makes me easy to find on social media. So do connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll happily answer any questions if you've got anything that you think, oh, I should have asked for that. But I think we're at 3 o'clock now, so I'll throw back to you, I think, Simon or Anthony, to close us off.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. That was a brilliant session. I know I enjoyed it, and like Julie, I picked up quite a few tips and tricks and thought processes for me to put into place, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call today have as well. Please, people, just go out there, think about things, and try and encourage your companies to adopt something to make life better for everybody, as well as for yourselves. So thank you very much, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you all again at the next meeting in April. Thank you very much.
Thank you.